poor single dad let a lost girl stay the night. He never expected her father to be a millionaire. It was a quiet evening when he first saw her. The small town he had just moved to felt empty in the late hours of the night. The few remaining locals wandered in and out of the local cafe, their conversations low and hushed. He had come for work, a simple job that didn't require much attention. But tonight, as he sat by the window of the nearly empty cafe, sipping his coffee, he couldn't help but notice her. She was seated at the far corner of the cafe, near the dim light of a table lamp. Her presence was magnetic, like she belonged there in a way that felt almost familiar. She had a calm and confident air about her that drew people in without saying a word. As he glanced at her once more, their eyes met. For a brief moment, the entire world around him seemed to pause. It wasn't just a look, it was something deeper. She seemed to know something about him that he didn't even understand himself, but he wasn't one to approach strangers, especially in small towns like this. But for some reason the urge to talk to her was stronger than his usual hesitation. With a deep breath, he stood up and walked toward her. As he reached her table, she looked up, her eyes softening with a welcoming smile. "You're new here, aren't you?" she asked, her voice low but clear. There was a warmth in it, something that made him feel at ease, despite his initial nerves. He nodded, unsure of what to say next. He had only just moved into the area, and besides work, he hadn't really met anyone yet. The town felt isolated, almost like a place where time stood still. But she was different, standing out in the way that made everything else seem dull in comparison. "I'm just passing through," he said, trying to sound casual. "Had to stop for a quick drink." She nodded thoughtfully, as if she already knew there was more to his story than he was letting on. "It's a quiet town," she said. "But sometimes the quiet can make things feel more alive, don't you think?" There was something about the way she spoke that caught him off guard. It wasn't just her words, but the way she carried them, like she wasn't just speaking to him, but speaking into him, making him think about things he had never really considered before. He sat down across from her, feeling an unexpected sense of comfort, despite the fact that they were strangers. They talked for hours. She shared stories about the town, the people, and even some of the history that was tied to the old streets. It was strange how naturally the conversation flowed. There was no awkwardness, no forced pauses. It felt like they had known each other far longer than just a couple of hours. But there was more to her, something he couldn't quite grasp. She seemed to understand him in a way that no one else did. Her eyes were kind, but held a depth of experience, something he couldn't quite place. She was older than him, maybe by a few years, but it was her presence that made her feel timeless. As the night grew deeper, the cafe began to empty. Most people had left, and the soft hum of the lights was the only sound left. She looked at him, her gaze steady, almost as if she was waiting for something. There was a sudden shift in the air, a quiet tension that he couldn't ignore. She leaned forward, just slightly, and in a low, intimate voice, she spoke. "Do you ever feel like you want to just let go of everything?" she asked. "To do something completely out of character just because you feel it?"
Her words were like a spark in a dark room.
They lit up something in him, something that had been quiet for so long. He thought about it for a moment, about all the times he had held back, afraid of what others might think or what might happen if he took risks. But something about her, the way she made him feel, made the idea of letting go seem less frightening. He didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure if he was ready to admit how badly he wanted that freedom, how much he longed to do something reckless, something unexpected.
Breath. She smiled softly, as though she understood.
It's easy to stay in the comfort zone, but sometimes stepping out is the only way to see the world differently, she said, almost as if she was speaking from experience.
Her words lingered in his mind, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he had met someone who understood, someone who saw beyond the surface. They sat there for a while longer, just talking, the world around them fading into the background. It was only when the clock on the wall ticked past midnight that he realized how much time had passed. He stood up, feeling a sense of finality to the conversation, but also a strange sense of beginning. As he walked toward the door, he glanced back at her one last time. Grasp. She was still sitting there, her gaze fixed on him as if she knew he was going to leave. "Take care," she said with a soft smile. He nodded, feeling the weight of her words in his chest. It was a strange feeling, like he had just crossed an invisible line, stepping into a new chapter of his life. That the night had ended, but it felt like something had begun. As he walked out of the cafe, the cool night air hit him, but it didn't feel cold. It felt like the first step into something new. The next day, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Her words echoed in his mind as he went about his routine. There was something about their conversation that stuck with him. It was more than just the usual small-town chatter. There was an energy between them, something unspoken that he hadn't felt in a long time. At work, he tried to focus, but his mind kept wandering back to the cafe. He thought about what she had said, about stepping out of his comfort zone. It was easy to brush it off as just casual conversation, but deep down, he felt like she had unlocked something in him, something that had been hidden for a while. That evening, after finishing his tasks, he found himself walking toward the cafe again. He didn't plan on going back so soon, but something was pulling him in. It was as though he was drawn to the place, to her. He didn't know what he expected, but he knew he had to see her again. When he walked through the door, the familiar scent of coffee and warm pastries greeted him. The cafe was quieter tonight, with just a few people scattered around. He scanned the room and spotted her in the same corner, sitting by the window. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, and it felt like a signal, like she had been waiting for him to return. He walked over to her, his heart beating faster than usual. There was a strange calmness in his chest, as if he had found something he had been searching for without even realizing it. "Back again so soon?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. I couldn't stay away," he admitted, surprised by the honesty in his own voice. "There's something about this place. Something about you. I feel like I'm supposed to be here." She didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at him as though she understood exactly what he meant. Then she nodded. "You're not the only one who feels that way," she said softly. "Sometimes the universe brings people together for a reason, but it's up to you to decide what you do with it." Her words lingered in the air, between them, heavy with meaning. He realized then that this wasn't just another random encounter. Something had shifted. Something was unfolding in ways he couldn't quite explain. But he knew that this moment, sitting across from her, was exactly where he needed to be. The days that followed seemed to blur together. He couldn't stop thinking about her, about the conversation they had, about the way she made him feel. There was something magnetic about her presence, something that made him feel seen in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. It was as if their meeting wasn't just a random occurrence. She had a way of getting under his skin, making him question everything he thought he knew about his life. Despite his growing curiosity, he remained cautious. He didn't know anything about her past or who she truly was. She was a mystery, wrapped in layers of charm and confidence. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he was drawn to the idea of getting to know her, of seeing what was beneath that calm exterior. He started to make excuses to visit the cafe more often. Each time he walked in, he hoped to see her sitting in her usual spot by the window, waiting for him. Psst. And, more often than not, she was there. Her presence was steady, like a constant in the chaotic, ever-changing world around him. There was a comfort in that, though he knew it wasn't something he should become too attached to. Life didn't always follow the path you expected, and he couldn't afford to lose himself in this new connection. They spoke about everything and nothing. They shared small details of their lives, but neither of them ever went too deep. Ricky found himself telling her things he hadn't shared with anyone else, things he had kept locked away for fear of judgment. She didn't ask for those secrets, but somehow she made him feel safe enough to share them. One evening, as they sat together in the cafe, the air between them felt different. She was quieter than usual, her eyes distant, as if lost in thought. It was unusual for her to be so withdrawn, and he couldn't help but wonder what was going on in her mind. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should ask, but the silence between them grew heavy. "What's on your mind?" he finally asked, his voice soft. She smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sometimes I wonder if people are ever really ready for what life throws at them," she said, her tone quiet and thoughtful. "We think we have everything figured out, but then something unexpected happens, and it changes everything." He leaned back in his chair, taking in her words. He understood what she meant. Life had a way of throwing curveballs, and no matter how much we tried to prepare, we were never truly ready for what came next. "I guess we never really know what's coming," he said quietly, feeling a deep resonance with her words. "But I think we have to face it anyway." Her gaze softened, and for a moment there was a silence that felt comforting rather than tense. It was as if they both understood the weight of what they were saying, even though they hadn't spoken about anything specific. There was an unspoken bond between them now, one that neither of them could explain. As the evening wore on, she stood up to leave, her movements graceful and purposeful. "I should get going," she said, her voice steady. "But I'm glad we talked." He nodded, standing as well. "Me too. I always enjoy our conversations." She smiled at him, a smile that was both warm and bittersweet. "But maybe next time we'll talk about something different." He watched as she walked out of the cafe, her figure disappearing into the night. He stood there for a moment, thinking about everything they had shared, everything she had said. He wasn't sure what it all meant, but he knew that something was changing inside him, and he couldn't help but feel that whatever it was tied to her. The following days felt like they were moving at a slower pace. He continued his routine, but his thoughts kept drifting back to her. He had never felt so conflicted before. On one hand, he knew there was something special about her, something that drew him in, something that made him feel alive in ways he hadn't felt in a long time. But on the other hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was getting too close, too fast. He didn't know where this connection was headed, and part of him was afraid to find out. Despite the uncertainty, he couldn't stay away. Every day he found himself walking toward the cafe, hoping she would be there. And every time he walked in, there she was, sitting in the same spot, looking as calm and composed as ever. It was like she was waiting for him, and he couldn't help but wonder if she felt the same pull that he did. One evening he arrived later than usual, the cafe already bustling with the after-work crowd. He glanced around but didn't see her. A pang of disappointment hit him, though he quickly brushed it aside. Maybe she wasn't coming today. Maybe she had other things to do. He didn't have the right to expect her to be there every time. But just as he was about to leave, he heard a familiar voice. "Leaving already?" she asked, her tone teasing but gentle. He turned to find her standing at the door. a soft smile on her lips. She looked different tonight. Her hair was down and she wore a jacket that looked a little more formal than usual. For a moment, he was taken aback. She wasn't the same person he had seen the other times. There was something more to her now, something he couldn't quite place. "I wasn't planning on staying long," he admitted, trying to hide the rush of excitement that had hit him at the sight of her. "But now that you're here," she laughed softly, a sound that made his heart skip a beat. "Well, now that I'm here, I suppose you'll have to stay." He grinned, unable to help himself. "I suppose I will." They sat down together just like they always did. But tonight, everything felt different. The air between them was charged with something unspoken. It wasn't just the conversation or the connection. They were both aware of it, even if they didn't fully understand what it was. And for the first time, he realized that he didn't need to understand it. He just needed to be there in the moment with her. As they talked, he couldn't help but notice the way she looked at him. There was a depth to her gaze, something that spoke volumes without a single word. It was as though she was seeing him for who he truly was, beyond the surface. It made him feel exposed, but not in a bad way. It was a feeling of being understood, of being accepted without judgment. For the first time, he allowed himself to let go of the questions that had been nagging at him. He wasn't sure where this was all going, but he knew he wanted to find out. And as they sat there, laughing and sharing stories, he realized that sometimes the answers didn't matter. What mattered was the journey, the experience of being with someone who made him feel like he wasn't alone in the world. When the night came to an end, she stood up, a soft smile playing on her lips. "I'll see you again soon?" she asked. Ration. He nodded, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. "Definitely." As she walked out, he sat there for a moment longer, the weight of her words and her presence still lingering in the air. But he didn't know what the future held. But he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Breaths. The following days felt like they were moving faster than he could keep up with. Everything seemed to blur together in a way that left him feeling a little lost, yet strangely content. He found himself eagerly looking forward to the evenings when he would visit the cafe, hoping to see her there again. The conversations they shared had become something he didn't realize he needed, something that now felt essential to his day. He'd always been a solitary person. And he had his routine, his work, and his quiet life. But now, something was different. There was a spark in his life that he hadn't known was missing until she had come into it. And with each passing day, it became clearer that this spark wasn't something he was ready to let go of. But as much as he wanted to ignore it, there were questions in his mind that he couldn't silence. He found himself wondering about her. Who was she really? What was her past like? Why did she seem to be so much more than what she let on? These thoughts circled in his mind, and despite the connection he felt with her, he couldn't shake the feeling that there were pieces of her story that were missing, pieces she wasn't ready to share yet. He tried not to let his curiosity overwhelm him. After all, they had only known each other for a short time. There was no rush to dig into her past, but each time they spoke, he couldn't help but wonder if there was more to her, if the calm and mysterious woman he saw sitting at the cafe, sharing quiet moments with him, was just the surface of a much deeper story. That night, as he walked into the cafe, he noticed that it was quieter than usual. The usual crowd of people had thinned out, leaving just a few patrons scattered around. He looked to the corner where she usually sat, but she wasn't there. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should just leave, but something inside him told him to stay. desperation. He couldn't explain why, but he knew he had to. He found an empty table near the window and sat down, feeling a little more exposed than usual. The silence around him seemed louder tonight, and for the first time he realized how much he had come to depend on the comfort of their conversations. He wasn't sure why it mattered so much. It was just a cafe, just two people talking. But the more time passed, the more he felt like there was something deeper between them. And the idea of not seeing her tonight left him feeling oddly unsettled. As he sat there, lost in his thoughts, the door opened and she walked in. He couldn't help but feel a rush of relief when he saw her. She looked the same, calm, composed, but there was something in her eyes that made her seem different. She noticed him immediately, her gaze softening when their eyes met. "I didn't think you'd be here tonight," she said, her voice light and almost teasing as she walked toward his table. He smiled, the tension in his chest easing. Breaths. "I wasn't sure either," he admitted, "but I'm glad I stayed." She sat down across from him, a slight smile on her lips. There was a different energy between them tonight, a quiet kind of understanding. He couldn't put his finger on it, but it was as if they both knew something had shifted. Not in an obvious way, but in a subtle, unspoken manner. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The soft hum of the cafe filled the space between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt natural, like they were both waiting for something, but neither of them knew exactly what that was. The silence wasn't awkward. It was just the calm before something deeper unfolded. Finally, she broke the silence. "Bray, do you ever feel like you're standing at the edge of something you can't fully see?" she asked, her voice quieter now, more thoughtful. He looked at her, unsure how to respond. It was an unexpected question, but he could feel the weight of it. "Yeah," he said slowly. "I think we all do sometimes. Like we know there's something more, but we're not sure what it is." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "But that's how I've been feeling lately. Like I'm standing on the edge of something, but I'm not sure if I should jump or just stay where I am." He studied her for a moment, trying to understand what she was saying. There was something in her words that made him realize that maybe they weren't just talking about the present moment, but about something much bigger. He had felt it too, in their conversations, in the way she made him feel alive, in a way that he hadn't experienced in years. But now, hearing her speak like this, he wondered if she had been feeling the same thing all along. "Maybe it's not about jumping," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Maybe it's about learning to trust where you are, even if you can't see everything yet." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if she was trying to find the truth in his words. "You really think that?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "I think that sometimes we want to see everything before we make a move, but life doesn't work that way. You have to trust that what's next will come, even if it's not clear right now." For a long moment she didn't say anything. Her eyes stayed locked on his, and he couldn't quite tell what she was thinking. But then she smiled. A small, gentle smile that didn't reach her lips but seemed to warm her entire face. "You're right," she said softly. "Maybe that's the way forward." He felt a rush of warmth in his chest. It was a quiet moment, but it felt like a shift had happened between them. There was an unspoken understanding now, a connection that went beyond the casual conversations they had shared before. It wasn't about knowing everything or having all the answers. It was about trusting the moment, trusting each other, and letting life unfold at its own pace. As the evening came to an end, she stood up to leave. He followed her to the door, both of them lingering for a moment, as if neither of them wanted to break the quiet spell that had settled over them. "I'll see you soon," he asked, his voice steady but full of hope. She nodded, her smile soft but sincere. Of course. And as she walked out of the cafe, he watched her disappear into the night. He stood there for a long time, feeling something shift within him. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it, whatever it might hold.